Red Bull's Monaco disaster did not look like bad luck. It looked like a warning. Max Verstappen started near the front, with one chance to stop Kimi Antonelli and Mercedes from pulling even further away, and then his Red Bull simply died. No launch. No power. No fight. A four-time world champion stranded before Turn 1, while the rest of Formula 1 disappeared up the road. But the failure itself was only the beginning. Because this was Verstappen's second retirement of the season. It happened at the first race under the Titan power unit rules. It came after the compression ratio controversy. And while Red Bull investigated Max's dead engine, Hager's podium was pulled into a separate Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile investigation. One team. Two cars. Two disasters. And now Verstappen sits 113 points behind Antonelli, while Red Bull are only fourth in the constructors' standings. So the question is no longer whether Red Bull are fast enough. It is much worse. Can Verstappen still trust his own car? Because if Monaco was not just a one-off failure, then Red Bull may not be losing the 2026 title to Mercedes. They may be losing it to their own reliability crisis. Subscribe to the channel. Monaco did not just expose a Red Bull failure. It exposed a Red Bull fear. Because when Max Verstappen's car died before the race had even reached Turn 1, the problem was not only the lost points. It was the message that failure sent to the entire paddock. The most important Red Bull on the grid could not be trusted at the most important moment of the weekend. And in Formula 1, that is how a technical issue becomes a crisis. For years, Red Bull built their dominance on more than speed. They built it on certainty. Verstappen could arrive at a race knowing that if he did his part, the car would give him a platform to fight. It would launch. It would respond. It would survive. It would allow him to turn aggression into control. That certainty was part of the intimidation. Rivals were not just racing Max Verstappen. They were racing a machine that almost never seemed to blink. But 2026 has changed the feeling completely. The RB22 is not only Red Bull's new car. It is the symbol of their new identity. A new power unit era. A Ford-backed project. A Red Bull powertrain's future that was supposed to prove the team could build its own destiny at the highest level. That is why Monaco hurt so badly. Because the car did not fail in a hidden corner of the season. It failed in public, at the start of the most famous Grand Prix in the world, while the cameras were locked on the front of the field and every rival was watching. There are failures that cost points. Then there are failures that damage trust. This was the second kind. Verstappen did not crash. He did not make a desperate move. He did not lose a wheel-to-wheel fight. He did not get beaten through strategy. He simply could not begin the race properly. That is the most helpless kind of defeat. A driver can fight a rival. He cannot fight a dead power unit. And that helplessness is what makes this story so dangerous for Red Bull. Because the signs were there before the lights went out. The engine cover had been removed unusually late, close to the moment the car was due to leave the garage. Verstappen later said the team was just double-checking something, and that it seemed okay. But in Formula 1, when something seems okay and then fails minutes later, the word okay starts to sound very different. Then came the formation lap. Verstappen struggled to get away cleanly. The preparation phase did not feel consistent. The hybrid power unit was already giving him warning signs, especially around the turbo preparation process. He recovered enough to reach the grid, but not enough to erase the doubt. And doubt is deadly at Monaco. At most circuits, a difficult start can be repaired. A driver can pass later, extend a stint, use a tire advantage, wait for strategy, or use a long straight to fight back. Monaco does not offer that kindness. Track position is everything. The start is not just the beginning of the race. It is one of the few moments where the entire result can change in a matter of seconds. Verstappen had one chance to launch cleanly. One chance to stay in the fight. One chance to stop the race from turning into another Mercedes-controlled afternoon. And the Red Bull failed. The moment he dropped the clutch, the power unit died. The car did not give him the acceleration he needed. The field rushed past. The danger was immediate, because a stationary or slow car on the Monaco grid is not only a sporting disaster. It is a safety nightmare. Cars are launching, drivers are looking ahead, gaps are closing, and suddenly one of the front runners is barely moving. That is how a reliability problem becomes terrifying. Verstappen was lucky the situation did not become worse. But luck does not give points. He crawled back toward the pits with only limited power. He could not go full throttle. The engine sounded wrong. The race was over almost instantly. And Red Bull had to investigate. That word matters. Because when a team investigates a failure, it means the explanation is not simple enough to be obvious. It means engineers must go through data, temperatures, pressures, software behavior, launch settings, power deployment, and the exact sequence that turned a front row start into a retirement. But while Red Bull were investigating internally, the rest of the paddock was already investigating emotionally. That is how Formula One works. Teams do not wait politely for the final technical report before forming suspicions. Rivals connect timing, history, regulation changes, earlier failures, and visible warning signs. Fans do the same. Media does the same. And suddenly, one broken power unit becomes a symbol of everything people already feared. For Red Bull, the fear was clear. Is this car too unreliable? That question would have been uncomfortable in any season. In 2026, it is explosive. Because this is not an ordinary engine project. Red Bull entered the new regulation era with a bespoke power unit developed through Red Bull Powertrains and Ford. That project carried massive ambition. It was meant to show independence, strength, and long-term control. But independence comes with risk. When the project works, the glory is yours. When it fails, there is nowhere to hide. And Red Bull now have failures that cannot be ignored. China had already delivered Verstappen's first retirement of the season. Monaco delivered the second. A single retirement can be dismissed as bad luck. Two retirements, especially this early in a championship fight, begin to look like a pattern. And the timing of Monaco made that pattern even darker. Because Monaco was the first race weekend under the Titan power unit rules, after the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile closed the compression ratio loophole that had caused concern among rival manufacturers earlier in the year. That does not prove the rule change caused the failure. That does not prove Red Bull did anything illegal. That does not prove the engine controversy and Verstappen's Monaco retirement are directly connected. But it does make the failure impossible to separate from the wider pressure around Red Bull's power unit. The compression ratio dispute had already placed Red Bull under attention. The rule tightening meant engines would be checked under hotter conditions, closer to real operating temperatures. Manufacturers had to make sure they complied under a tougher standard. Then, at the first race under that standard, Verstappen's power unit failed at the start. Formula One does not ignore coincidences like that. It studies them. It whispers about them. It turns them into questions. Did Red Bull have to adjust the engine's operating window? Did reliability become more fragile after the new compliance conditions? Did the team lose margin? Was Monaco simply cruel timing, or a sign that the project is operating too close to the edge? No official answer in the source proves those things. But the questions themselves are damaging. Because Red Bull are no longer racing from a position of dominance. They are racing from a position of doubt. And doubt changes everything. It changes how Verstappen feels when he sits on the grid. It changes how engineers prepare the power unit. It changes how aggressive the team can be with settings. It changes how rivals interpret every radio message. It changes how the world reacts to every small delay in the garage. A reliable team gets the benefit of the doubt. An unreliable team becomes the doubt. That is the brutal shift Red Bull are facing. And Monaco made it worse because Verstappen's disaster was not the team's only problem. Isaac Hadjar gave Red Bull the one thing that should have softened the blow. He finished on the podium, a huge result for a rookie and a vital result for a team desperate to leave Monaco with something positive. But even that could not stay clean. Hadjar was pulled into a Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile investigation after the red flag, because mechanics were observed working on his car during the race suspension in a way that was not permitted under the regulations. So Red Bull could not even tell the simple story of one car failing and the other saving the weekend. Instead, the story became much worse. Verstappen's car failed before the race began. Hadjar's podium came under threat after the race. One garage had a technical disaster. The other had a procedural investigation. That is not bad luck. That is operational chaos. And at Monaco, chaos becomes magnified. Every team is under pressure there. The walls are close. The pit lane is tight. The race can turn on a safety car, a red flag, or one tiny timing error. But championship teams are supposed to handle that pressure better than everyone else. Red Bull used to be the team that thrived in those moments. Now they look like a team being swallowed by them. That is why the question is not just about reliability in the mechanical sense. It is about whether Red Bull can execute a clean weekend anymore. Can the power unit survive? Can the procedures hold? Can the mechanics stay within the red flag limits? Can the team give Verstappen a car that starts, finishes, and lets him fight? Can Red Bull stop giving the paddock reasons to question them? At Monaco, the answer was not convincing. And while Red Bull were dealing with all of this, Mercedes were doing the opposite. Kimi Antonelli converted pole into victory. A teenager winning Monaco. His 5th consecutive victory of the season. A championship lead growing from impressive to frightening. That contrast hurts Red Bull more than any technical report. Because Formula One is a sport of comparison. A failure is bad. A failure while your rival wins is devastating. Antonelli left Monaco looking like the center of the new era. Verstappen left Monaco with another retirement, another investigation inside his own garage, and a championship gap that now looked brutal. 113 points behind. That number is not just mathematics. It is emotional damage. It tells Verstappen that he cannot afford normal problems anymore. He cannot afford another retirement. He cannot afford a weekend where the car is almost ready, almost fixed, almost competitive. He needs perfection, and Red Bull just delivered the opposite. That is why his frustration matters. When Verstappen says the failure is annoying and disappointing, the words may sound controlled. But the situation behind them is extreme. He is a four-time world champion sitting 7th in the standings, behind drivers he used to measure from far ahead. Red Bull are 4th in the Constructors' Championship. 4th, behind Mercedes, Ferrari, and McLaren. For the team that dominated the previous era, that is not a minor setback. It is a collapse of status. And status matters in Formula One because it affects pressure. When Red Bull were winning everything, rivals had to explain why they could not catch them. Now Red Bull have to explain why they keep failing. That reversal is painful. The team that once defined the standard is now being measured against it. And the standard is no longer Red Bull. It is Mercedes. That is the deepest wound. Because 2026 was supposed to be a reset for everyone. New power units. New technical demands. New operating windows. New opportunities. Red Bull were supposed to remain one of the teams shaping the future. Instead, Mercedes have adapted better. Antonelli has become the breakout star. Hamilton's Ferrari is scoring heavily. McLaren remain in the fight. And Red Bull are trying to understand why their lead driver's car could not even launch in Monaco. This is how eras change. Not always with one dramatic overtake. Sometimes with a car sitting still while the future drives away. And Verstappen knows that better than anyone. He has been on the other side of this story. He has been the driver pulling away while rivals suffered failures, strategy confusion, and desperate explanations. He knows what it feels like when a team loses control of the narrative. He knows how quickly the paddock moves from respect to doubt. That is why Red Bull must act quickly. Not with vague confidence. Not with empty reassurance. Not with public calm that hides private panic. They need a cause. They need a fix. They need proof. Because until they produce proof, every future weekend carries the Monaco shadow. The next time the engine cover comes off late, people will remember Monaco. The next time Verstappen reports inconsistent power, people will remember Monaco. The next time Red Bull has a difficult formation lap, people will remember Monaco. The next time Hager's car is under scrutiny, people will remember Monaco. That is the danger of a weekend like this. It changes how every future event is interpreted. A small issue no longer looks small. A delay no longer looks routine. A technical check no longer feels harmless. Everything becomes part of the pattern. And Red Bull's pattern is exactly what they must break. They need consecutive clean races. They need Verstappen finishing. They need strong launches. They need no power unit alarms. They need Hadjar scoring without Stewart's drama. They need weekends where the headlines are about pace, not investigations. That is the only way to rebuild trust. Because trust does not return through words. It returns through repetition. Start the car. Launch the car. Finish the race. Score the points. Do it again. That is the only answer that matters. But the problem is that Red Bull are trying to rebuild trust while the title fight continues without them. They do not have the luxury of a quiet development year. Verstappen is not a rookie learning the sport. Ford is not a small badge with no expectations. Red Bull are not a midfield team celebrating survival. They are supposed to be contenders. And contenders do not get sympathy when they fail. They get scrutiny. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile's role adds another layer. The governing body had already acted on the compression ratio issue by tightening the measurement standard. That was a regulatory solution, not a punishment. It did not mean Red Bull were found guilty. It meant the rules were clarified and hardened because the original interpretation created concern.